Houston. Houston, we have a problem. DJ Apollo has landed. I repeat, DJ Apollo has landed at Hitmix 88.9 WEIU.
Welcome to the Tales of Music and Film. My name is DJ Apollo, or real name, Christian Taylor. And boy, am I excited to be back on the airwaves. We have just gotten back from our Christmas break, and it is the first day of my final semester at Eastern Illinois University, and I am still trying to come to terms with that. I am extremely shocked. 5 years in college, and I'm down to my last semester. But hey, I got about 5 more months to go, and that gives me plenty of time to do a heck of a lot more podcast recording. So let's keep this awesome journey going, shall we? And today we are back on the topic of music, but I am not doing this topic alone. I have my good friend
Preston Vanswall.
This guy is literally like a regular on my show. Whenever I do, especially music, I have to have him on.
It's always such an honor. When you graduate, we got to continue this show, man. I absolutely love being on here. So anytime you want me on, I am game.
Oh yeah, absolutely, no doubt. We're gonna keep. I'm keeping the show going even after I graduate. That is a promise. I'll sign a paper right now. This show ain't going anywhere. But over break, I was trying to think of something different to do with music, because I was just doing, old school albums, but I wanted to try something different. And then that was when Preston gave me this amazing idea. Why not we dedicate a recording talking about a specific song that had a huge, major impact? And we thought, and he came out with the idea, why not we cover Don McLean's American Pie? And it's one of the most famous, story-driven songs that's ever been written. And it's one of those songs that, it literally takes you back in time. It's literally an 8-minute history lesson. When I listen to this song, I think I learned more about history in these 8 minutes than I ever did in high school, to be honest.
I understand what you mean by that. This song is so incredibly influential on the world. I've actually heard about them making dubs of it in other countries and it being popular.
Yeah, and this song, just to give you an idea, just how big of an impact this song has on everyone. It's for example, Weird Al did a parody of this with the Star Wars song.
Yes.
Can you look it up?
Yeah.
Look the name up. In 1999, before The Phantom Menace came out, Weird Al got to read the script of the story, and he decided to parody American Pie with Star Wars, and you can find the music video on YouTube, and it's absolutely hilarious. Heck, it got so popular that I even heard on some copies of, if you go to the bonus features, if you buy a Blu-ray copy of Phantom Menace, if you go to bonus features, you can find the video of the song. Do you?
Well, as you know, Christian, I am a huge Weird Al fan.
Yeah,
huge. I've seen him in concert multiple times. I've got all sorts of collector stuff, but the song is called The Sega Begins. And a fun fact about that: Weird Al has actually said that America Pie is one of his favorite songs of all time. But when he first made that song, there were a lot of kids that were fans that would hear that and the actual American Pie, and they were like, why did someone make a sad parody of a Weird Al song?
Oh, that's so funny to me. They thought that his version was the original.
Yes.
That's hilarious. Yeah, so and this song's been covered by other artists. I was actually looking it up not too long ago. The song was covered by Taylor Swift, and it was also covered by Madonna as well. And I mean, this song has just had a big cultural impact.
I honestly think it is a staple cornerstone song in American music history.
Oh, no doubt about it. And before we get into the song, I'd like to take a minute to talk about Don McLean. So, Don McLean III, full name, he's an American songwriter and guitarist. He's best known for his 1971 hit song, American Pie. And it is a 8.5-minute folk rock cultural touchstone about the loss of innocence of the early rock and roll generation. And that could not be more right. Like, this whole 8-minute song is just takes you back in time from the 50s to the 60s to the early 70s. It's talking about how the world changed a lot. And I actually found out something pretty funny. Like, Don McLean was in an interview once, and somebody asked him the meaning behind American Pie, and Don goes, "The song means that I'll never have to work in my life ever again," because of all the money he made from it. like that was hilarious. And I would also like to point out, so Don McLean has a reputation of being called a one-hit wonder. And because everybody thinks that this song was his only good song, and I can't confirm it's not his only one.
Oh,
I actually looked it up. He had 5 top 40 hits.
Oh, yeah.
So he's not a one-hit wonder. And I think, honestly, though, like, I don't know if you'd say this is a controversial comment, but I think Don McLean's up there with, like, Johnny Cash and Bob Dylan for me. Like, when it comes to, like, you know, folk music, like, he's up there with Bob Dylan for me. Like, the dude is underrated. Like, I don't think he gets the credit he deserves, to be honest. Like, his songwriting, like, is just, like, amazing.
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
many good ones.
I would recommend, like, listen to the whole A side of the American Pie record. Like, it's something else. Like, it's good. It's very good. And with that out of the way, I think that is now going to lead us into the song. So the song was released in 1971, and the song Don dedicated the American Pie record to Buddy Holly. So while we're talking about that, so the very first verse talks about so the first, like, couple of verses talks about the Buddy Holly plane crash. So I'm going to take you back in time to the winter of 1959. It was the Winter Dance Party Tour. The 3 big acts of that tour, the big ones, was Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and the Big Bopper. And apparently during that tour, it was during the wintertime, and their tour bus was in very bad shape. The heater wasn't working, and it got so cold that the Big Bopper was suffering from a fever. And a band on that tour, I think they were called the Belmonts or something. I can't remember the name. Their drummer got frostbite on his feet, and there was actually a show they did where Buddy filled in for him on the drum kit. There's some, like, rare pictures that you can find of that. And so they had just finished their show in Clear Lake City, and Buddy decided to chart a plane to fly to the next stop. And Buddy's band was called the Crickets, and they were a 4-piece band for a little bit, but their lead guitar player left after one tour because he realized that the rock and roll lifestyle wasn't for him. So then they became a trio, and then in, like, 58, I think it was, the other 2 members quit because they were only interested in the money. And, like, Buddy's singles like Peggy Sue and That'll Be the Day made them so much money they just quit. And Buddy was pretty heartbroken about that. So on the Winter Dance Party Tour, he had to hire 2 new band members, and one of them was famous country singer Waylon Jennings, and he was the bass guitar player. Buddy played the guitar. I do not know who played drums for him on the tour, but he bought 3 tickets for the plane for him and his 2 band members. And the Big Bopper had heard about this, and he asked if he could have a seat on the plane because he was sick as a dog at this point. He wanted to fly out there so he could get there faster, so he could like rest up and get in better shape. So Waylon Jennings offered his seat to the Big Bopper, and he was just going to ride the bus. And then Buddy's other band member ran into Richie Valens, and Richie wanted to fly too, so they did a coin toss, and Richie called heads, and the coin landed on heads, so he got the seat. And the three of them flew out, and the minute they left the runway, a giant snowstorm hit, and that plane should not have been in the air. It was actually starting to snow pretty bad by the time they took off. The airport they left from actually left a warning saying no more planes are taking off tonight, but it was too late. The pilot didn't receive that message when he left. And then for the following morning, the plane was found out in the country, crashed it was like 3 feet into the ground, and all four members, all three musicians, including the pilot, were all killed. And it was a very sad day. Like, people thought that this incident marked the end of rock and roll because Buddy, Richie, and Bopper were some of the big names at the time. Because Elvis was in the Army at the time, and Chuck Berry had gotten into some legal trouble, so that plane crash nearly ended rock and roll right then and there. It wasn't until the Beatles came to America in '63 that it got big again. And this is where Don McLean's story comes in. So Don McLean, during the time the plane crash happened, he was a paper boy, and he remembers the morning of the accident. He was, throwing the papers into people's yards, and he got curious. He opened up one of them, and he saw on the front page, it said, Buddy Holly killed in a plane crash. And apparently not long after the accident, his father died too. So those were big deaths in his life that he coped with. And when he wrote American Pie, he dedicated the whole album to Buddy. If I own the record, you turn the vinyl over, you look down at the bottom, it says dedicated to Buddy Holly. And I actually found out, so there's a very cool documentary that you can watch called Behind the Music about the day the music died. It's an hour long, very good.
I've actually seen it.
Yeah, very good. It goes into much more detail regarding what happened. But when Don McLean's American Pie started playing on the radio, radio stations actually started playing Buddy's music, like That'll Be the Day Again. So it's like his music was kind of brought back to life, because the minute the Beatles came to the U.S., like, Buddy was literally forgotten. Like, nobody thought about the Crickets anymore. It was all Beatles. But Don McLean's song helped reintroduce people to Buddy's music. So I thought that was a pretty cool thing. So that's a little more history for you regarding the verse. And I believe, Preston, would you want to go into the first sections of the song?
Yeah, so the song starts out iconically with the verse, "A long, long time ago, I can still remember how that music used to make me smile."
Yep.
And obviously that's talking about the rock and roll and Buddy Holly's music.
Yeah, exactly. And that leads us into the second verse, which goes into something like this. And I knew if I had my chance that I could make those people dance and maybe they'd be happy for a while. Like, that right there, just kind of going into how people wanted to be musicians, just play music and have people have a good time.
Yeah.
And I feel like that talks about how, people playing in small bands in the high school gyms and the teenagers all dancing and stuff.
Well, and it's like, for me, I imagine what John McLean went through as this kid, opening that newspaper and seeing that, is like if I turned on the news and found out that Weird Al had died. Like,
yeah,
that's my hero. Like, just having that happen, I'd be like, parody music, like, that would just never happen again, like, is what I'd be thinking. It's like, I can only imagine.
Yeah, I know. It's just like when you watch the behind the music documentary, like when it gets to the part when they're talking about people's reactions to the plane crash, like, dude, it hit everybody hard. Like, I remember in the documentary, Richie Valens' producer talked about when he heard on the radio, he said it felt like someone took a baseball bat to his stomach, like. This guy was Richie was only 17 and his career only lasted 6 months, but he was on the top of the world. And then in one instant, it's over, And Buddy was only 22. He was younger than me, man. Like,
Yeah.
talk about, ain't that crazy?
Yeah.
And the Big Bopper, I think, was like in his early 30s. Like those guys were, like, they had, like, man, they were taken way too soon.
They really were.
And how does the next verse go, Preston?
All right, so we left off where?
We were just talking about, and maybe they'd be happy for a while.
Yeah, but February made me shiver with every paper I delivered. Bad news on the doorstep. I couldn't take one more step.
Which I think literally that's talking about when he found out about the crash in the paper. I feel like that's what that's talking about.
Yeah.
Right there.
And talking about, like, I can't remember if I cried when I read about his widowed bride, but something touched me deep inside the day the music died.
Yeah.
And I think it's like, I mean, obviously I can't speak for Don McLean, but what I think of when I hear this is like, so he was very young reading this, and I feel like maybe that was his first real experience of like a death that was really personal to him, and he was like thinking about Buddy Holly's family and like how that would impact them, and it's just he was never the same after that.
Yeah, no, a lot of people were. And fact, I just did the math. Don would have been 14 when Buddy was killed in the crash. He would have been 14 years old. He was born in 1945. He's currently 77 years old. So he would have been 13 or 14 years old whenever all this went down. So he was just an early teenager.
Yeah.
And then that leads us to, let's see here. So, bye, Miss American Pie. Drove my Chevy to the levee, but the levee was dry. See, that's the part that kind of confused me. What is that talking about?
Okay, so
Do you know?
talking about Miss American Pie, this kind of ties back to our Nylon Curtain album.
Really?
Talking about saying goodbye to the American dream.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I get
It's
you.
like,
yeah.
Goodbye American dream. Like, he drove my Chevy to the levee, but the levee was dry. It's like he was like on his way to pursuing something that he wanted, and he was just about to get there, and then it was all run out.
Oh, yeah, fair point. Because, like, when I listened to this song, like, here's a section I really wanted to get into. It's like, people seem to have this idea that the 50s were, like, a very peaceful time in America. Like, there were no wars. Everybody was happy. But that's not the case at all. Like, literally, I want to take a minute here. I want to read to you a comment that I found on YouTube. There is a amazing video that you can find about this guy who goes into the cultural history of American Pie, and I found this amazing comment. It's from this person. It goes like this. I grew up in the 50s, and let me tell you that the Happy Days image of the 50s was an illusion created 20 years later. The decade started with the Korean War conflict, which was quickly followed by the McCarthy witch hunts. The whole decade passed under the shadow of nuclear war. That the war didn't come was no relief to a child being taught how to duck and cover under his school desk and dive into the nearest ditch when the siren went off, and there was a siren in every town. The carefree sound of rock and roll was condemned by every adult as the devil's music. That scene you showed of a young couple dancing would have been banned as sexual explicit and never broadcast on TV. When Elvis appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show singing Innocent Song, the camera was kept glued to his face because his body movements were considered obscene. Those were not happy days. Those were days of fear glanced over with a facet of prosperity. That's honestly very true though when you think about it, you know, like, because in the video he shows footage of these teenagers dancing, you know, in the 50s, and like, you know, back then, you know, that was explicit, you know, you know, and so that would never have been allowed to show on television. But the 50s weren't like peaceful. You gotta remember, like, racism was at an all-time high. Like, it was not a good decade, and like it literally began with the Korean War conflict that lasted for about 3 years. And I feel like Don gets into that with the song about how the 50s were basically an illusion in a way.
I describe the 50s as a very whitewashed decade. It's where like they're covering it up with the paint and making it look all clean, but underneath all that paint there's a lot of filth. And eventually that's going to peel through and be visible, and that's what happened in the 60s.
Yeah, exactly. And
like the 60s didn't happen out of nowhere. It was a long time building up.
Oh yeah, dude, that was like why do you think that decade was so crazy? Because
because they were ignored.
Exactly. Like, it was like that was a good 20-year build up. Like, everything that went down in the 40s, World War II.
Yeah.
You know, and everything that went down in the 50s, like that, dude, this was building up for 2 full decades. Then the 60s showed up, it blew. Like, you know, like.
Well, and then you had the whole Russian Red Scare. That was very prevalent in the 50s.
Yeah, you had that too. And then, you know, like I mentioned earlier with that comment, everybody was scared that there was any day that a missile or a nuke was going to be, you know, dropped on the U.S. or something. Like, everybody was scared out of their mind of like nuclear war, which you know, in the early 60s, the Cuban Missile Crisis, you know, like, and so we were talking about, but the lead was dry. Then them good old boys were drinking whiskey and rye, singing "This'll Be the Day That I Die," and that obviously is, of course, referencing Buddy's song, "That'll Be the Day When I Die." You know, like that's referencing that. And so, and here's this next section that comes right after that I found this particular section here I was really wanting to get into. So Preston, why don't you go ahead and read the next part?
Did you write the book of love, and do you have faith in God above if the Bible tells you so? So
with that part, I'll go first. So for me, that section makes me think how, like, back then, like, religion was like a very like tradition with most like American families, and I feel like what that's talking about is how like people kind of like use the Bible to like justify things. Maybe like they were using this thing that wasn't necessarily giving the right answers, you know, like people may have been too reliant on there, you know. That's what I get. People possibly, now this is all pure interpretation. This is my opinion alone. I just want to make that clear right off the bat. For me, that verse makes you think of how people were relying on religion, maybe a little too much, to justify the horrible things that were happening behind the scenes.
I understand where you're coming from with that. You want to hear what the actual meaning of it was?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So I'm reading from an article from musicgrotto.com. And it says, the first line in this verse is one of the most commonly misinterpreted, with many believing there's a deeper meaning. Instead, McLean is referencing a couple of songs from his favorite era of music. The Monotones came out with The Book of Love, while Don Cornell released The Bible Tells Me So.
Oh, okay, that's cool.
And then the rest of the verse details McLean trying to win the affection of the proverbial Miss America Pie, continuing to make the 50s song references.
Oh, okay.
So high school dances being held in gymnasiums were wildly popular back then and still are today.
And they still are, yeah, but frankly, I don't think they're as good, though. Like, I think the people back then had it better with the music. The music back then, I find myself being it's easier to dance to than today's music. Like, I really feel something with that stuff. I feel like with today's music, it's not really like stuff you can dance to necessarily. I feel like it's not as good, but that's just me.
Yeah, I understand. I kind of feel the same way.
Because I noticed, like, at my high school dances, there were the songs I had a hard time dancing with them, to be honest. But if they played like any 50s music, I think that would have really got me like. I feel like I would have been able to dance to those better. And that's just my opinion on that.
But it goes on to talk about, like, do you believe in rock and roll? Can music save your mortal soul? And can you teach me how to dance real slow?
Yeah, see, that one confuses me a little bit. Like, do you have an interpretation regarding like this particular lyric section?
So I think it's just, I imagine this to be like, so because of the incident where people basically just had rock and roll drop off, and it's like there just wasn't a whole lot of life left in it. I imagine it like he's still remembering those times and wanting to, like, revive it, and it's like he can't, and so it's like
all he can do is like how you say it, recognition, like remembering the good times.
Yeah.
All he can do is just kind of like rekindle those memories and help people think, maybe. And to talk about what you were mentioning about rock and roll, like there was a good 3 years where, like, I think the only good band we had after the accident was the Beach Boys. Like, I remember, have you ever seen George Lucas's movie American Graffiti?
Yes.
It takes place in '62. This is before the Beatles showed up to America. There's this scene where one of the main characters is listening to music, and this girl is listening to the Beach Boys, and the guy turns it off, and she's like, "Why'd you do that?" He's like, "I don't like that surfing crap. Rock and roll has been going downhill ever since Buddy Holly died, you know." And because like back then, you know, like we didn't have that much. Like we had a few bands like did some things, but it kind of felt like they were just trying to like copy and paste. Like it didn't feel original. So there was a good 3 years, man. Like rock basically kind of died. Like it was dead in the water. Then the Beatles showed up and it just skyrocketed. Then after them, you had Bob Dylan, you had the Stones, you had the Who. You know, like just just bigger and bigger acts that followed.
Right. Well, like it continues on just talking about like reflection of like a very simple time in high school, where it says like, well, I know that you're in love with him because I saw you dancing in the gym. You both kicked off your shoes. Man, I dig those rhythmy blues.
Yeah, it's just like they're just having fun. They're just dancing. They're not worried or scared about anything. They're just having fun. And I feel like I would even make the argument, you know, that the 50s wasn't really a simple time. I feel like we've been led to believe that, but it really was not a simple time. Maybe for teenagers,
yeah, that's
but
what I'm saying is like when he was growing up, though, for him at that time, it was simpler.
Yeah, true.
It was
yeah.
before he'd completely lost his innocence, even though his life had been changed by the whole Buddy Holly incident.
Oh yeah, definitely. And that brings me to the next part. I'll read this one. It goes something like this: I was a lonely teenage Bronco buck with a pink carnation in a pickup truck, but I knew I was out of luck the day the music died. Now, I remember watching an interview. He was talking about how, like, I think he said he's never owned a pickup truck once in his life. I feel like that one, he was just kind of like...
Yeah, he put that in there because, and his exact words were, "I can put whatever I wanted in my songs."
Yeah, I saw that. I saw that. Yeah, that was funny. It's my song. I can put what I want.
After that, it goes back into the chorus, so we could skip that part.
Yeah, we can skip. Yeah, the main chorus that we read earlier. Now, here we go. Now, here's where we have a 10-year time jump, and it goes like this. Now, for 10 years, we've been on our own. A moss grows fat on a rolling stone, which I feel like that's talking about the Rolling Stones, you know.
It's actually not. I
It's
remember
not?
what he said about the documentary.
Oh, so
While
what was it?
Rolling Stone, he acknowledged, was a very popular term and a popular band back then. This was actually just making a 10-year jump and commenting on the fact that he was kind of overweight and out of shape.
Oh, really?
That's what the moss grows fat on a rolling stone means, is he was out of
Oh, okay. Dude, you're like blowing my mind right now with these.
shape.
Like,
I just remember him talking about it on the documentary.
well, because dude, I gotta be honest with you. Going into this, I had a feeling that a lot of my interpretations weren't gonna be correct. Because unlike most of the other fans, like Preston's mentions that he's mentioned this in other recordings, where it's like people it's just like we have a habit of assuming, oh my gosh, this has to mean like something deep, and it's not like at all.
Even though this is absolutely a deep song, not everything in it has some underlying meaning.
Yeah, I just think it's hilarious. Like I can only imagine the millions of interpretations people have.
Yeah.
with what they think the lyrics are talking about. It's hilarious. And then it continues with, but that's not how it used to be. When the jester sang for the king and queen in a coat he borrowed from James Dean and a voice that came from you and me. Now, I feel like, is he going back to the 50s again? Because James Dean was a famous 50s actor. He only did, he was killed in a car accident.
Mm-hmm.
And I think his movie career didn't last very long, but the few years of his acting career, he was a big name. You know, he was the young, the handsome young cowboy guy. The girls were just in awe.
Yeah.
And now, a voice that came from you and me. Does he mean like people trying to be musicians, like trying to sing for people? Because I don't know what he means by that. Do you have any idea?
So actually, there is a theory. I don't think he really covered this particular part a whole lot in the documentary. Like basically, there's a theory that this is talking about the Kennedy assassination.
Oh, really?
And the king and queen being like the Kennedys and the jester being the shooter.
Oh, okay.
Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know.
But it makes sense, though, if you think about it.
Right. But for this part, we could talk about our own personal interpretations.
Oh, yeah, sure. You go ahead. Like, I want to hear about, like, what are your some interpretations with this?
Well, before I go into that, I just want to say that while I do know for a fact that he had a reason for putting all of this in here that was personal to him, I feel like American Pie was the kind of song where it's like, I think it's meant to mean something different to everybody. And it's not like everything has to have a deeper meaning that we all have to agree on. But I honestly think he wrote this to communicate multiple messages.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like, it doesn't have... I feel like it's got, like... it's got dozens of, like, messages trying to tell people, Like, for me, the main one is that the 50s is not what you think it was. It was not... May have been simple for some people, like we mentioned earlier, but that was just a fake image. That was never a thing,
right?
And that's like one of the main messages that I get. And what's the message for you?
I just picture the jester being like some sort of like really corrupt politician that's playing both sides of the system, like the two different parties being the king and queen, and then they're at the top like playing both sides and saying, hey, this is what you guys mean, but I'm wearing this coat, I'm protecting myself, but really I'm not here for the people. I'm here for me.
Yeah, I'm here for my own, like how would you say it, personal agenda or vendetta or something. Like, for me,
because people like to be polarized on all sorts of sides of the political spectrum.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, I think that everybody truly wants, or not necessarily everybody, but hopefully most people really just want what's best for this country. And there are politicians out there that harness that and use that passion for evil.
Oh yeah, like the facade. Oh, I'm so on your side. I'll fight for you. But again, it's literally like a mask. That they're wearing.
Their actions don't reflect their words.
Oh no, not at all.
And I mean that's a problem today just as much as it was in the 50s or before.
Yeah, and so here's one this next verse here is one I really want to talk to you about. It goes like this. And while the king was looking down, the jester stole his thorny crown. The courtroom was adjourned. No verdict was returned. Now, I remember in that video that I've mentioned a few times already, the guy talks like he believes how while the king was looking down is him talking about Elvis, the king of rock and roll. Mm-hmm. And the jester stole his thorny crown. He believes that Don is talking about when Bob Dylan showed up. Like he kind of took the crown away from Elvis, and now he's wearing it because he got big like pretty quickly. And I mean, that could be it. It does make sense. Like, what do you think, Preston?
Well, actually, I remember him saying in the documentary, he said, if I wanted to write a song about Bob Dylan, I would have sang about Bob Dylan.
Sure.
But he's basically just referring to this jester as being this like insulting, just like heckler to this king during his performance, and he's like looking down on him, and he steals his crown. And it's like, it goes back to what I said in the previous verse. It's like they're making like, from my interpretation, it's like someone's making a joke out of our country and our Constitution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can definitely see that too. And how would you want to read the next verse? Let's keep this going.
Yeah, absolutely. So the courtroom was adjourned. No verdict was returned. So you have this whole thing going on, but nothing's being done about it.
Oh, yeah. You know what? You know what that makes you think of? Like, I've talked about this with my parents several times. I feel like in politics, it's always talk of big things that'll happen and nothing happens.
Yeah.
It's all talk and promises and nothing.
And
empty
I just want to
promises.
say to any listeners, this is not a political statement that we are trying to like convince people to go one way or another.
Oh, no,
that's
no,
not
no.
what we're here for. And that's why we're really not getting political here, because while everybody does have their own opinions and they're entitled to it, we're just speaking facts.
Yeah,
we are not bringing emotion into this.
Nothing at all. This is a completely neutral. Like, we're not fighting for either side here. Like,
Yeah.
This is just a neutral recording, just talking about either it's fact or our personal interpretation of what some of the lyrics might be talking about, and that's all.
Yeah.
And so this verse,
Yeah, I'm curious to see what you think about this next part.
yeah. So, did you read it yet?
No, you go ahead and read this one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll go. So, and while Lennon read a book on Marx, the quartet practiced in the park, and we sang dirges in the dark the day the music died. Now, I believe, is he talking about John Lennon? I think
He's talking about both Lennons, because both of them were communists, actually.
So wait.
And he was talking about communism.
So we're talking about John Lennon, and who was the other Lennon?
Vladimir Lenin, I believe his name was.
And who was Vladimir Lenin? Do you remember?
He was like an old Russian leader.
Okay. Man, I just cannot believe that. Like, yet again, I'm just like, I had this completely wrong. Like, there's so many years I thought I had it figured out. Nope.
But so he was talking about both of them because, we were just talking about the Red Scare earlier.
Oh,
that
yeah,
ties
yeah.
into this. Because John Lennon, I've got respect for the guy, but you can't deny he had some interesting perspectives on things. I mean, he was a hippie, and he was just all about oh yeah, free world, like everybody just treat everybody nice. You know, the typical hippie stuff. And I mean, that was kind of what communism looked like on paper. And so I think that's why he was that way. But like he's regarding both Lenins in this case. Yeah, he said in the documentary, and just talking about the Red Scare and communism, and just basically just benchmarking that part of his life. I mean, there's not really a lot of detail on it, but that is why it's there.
Okay.
Because I imagine this being kind of like a diary for him in a way.
Oh yeah, I do. Like literally, this whole thing just feels like a long like notebook entry turned into a song. Like that. It's breathtaking to me. You know, like I think like Don's music writing is very unmatched in some way. It's like how many people can write an 8-minute song with this much detail and heart and soul in it, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's just pure just breathtaking stuff for the ears. Now, so this verse here, I'm kind of curious what our interpretations are going to be on this one. So it goes with something like this. Helter skelter in a summer sweller, the birds flew off the fallout shelter, 8 miles high and falling fast, and landed foul on the grass. The players tried for a forward pass with a gesture on the sidelines and a cast.
Okay, so there's a lot to break down there.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, there's a lot to... So, like, let's break this down.
So, according to the website Music Grotto that I've been reading,
okay,
helter skelter in a summer swelter, birds flew off with a fallout shelter. That is, according to this theory, continuing the Beatles references.
Yeah, because I was going to say,
McLean mentions Helter Skelter, which refers to one of their songs, as well as Charles Manson.
Oh, okay.
Next, McLean gives a couple of nods to the band The Byrds, but mentions that their music changed for the worse in the 1960s, with a marijuana use potentially being a key reason.
Oh, okay. Because, like, fun fact, I knew it had to be a Beatles reference because Helter Skelter is a song that's featured on the Beatles' 1968 album, the White Album. And there's actually some music fans out there that consider that to be the very first heavy metal song. People have theories that was what birthed heavy metal. Because if you go back and listen to that, dude, for late 60s, that song was extremely heavy for late 60s.
Oh, yeah.
And I actually, a little side note, I actually watched, Paul McCartney was inspired to write that song because he read an article about a song The Who wrote, and they were talking about how heavy and like groundbreaking it was, and Paul got jealous, and that's when he wrote Helter Skelter on the White Album to kind of like compete with The Who. And, like, it's a pretty heavy song. I recommend looking it up. And so second half, so 8 miles high, falling fast. It landed a foul on the grass. The players tried for a forward pass with a gesture on the sidelines and a cast. So what do you think, like, that second half is talking about?
Oh, boy. You know, why don't you take your perspective on this one first? Because honestly, this part's tricky for me.
Oh, is it really?
Yes.
Okay, so like, dude, I don't know where to start with this. Like, it landed a foul on the grass. So I'm imagining, are we talking about did something happen at like a football game or something?
I don't know if it's literally talking about a football game.
Like the players tried for a forward pass, and then he mentions the gesture yet again. He's on the sidelines in a cast, so the gesture is injured in some way.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if okay, honestly, gesture on the sidelines in the cast. You know what I think it is?
What?
I think it's mentioning Charles Manson again because, like, dude, the 60s were going pretty well. Remember how, dude, the 60s ended with the Manson murders in '69 with Shannon, that actress, Shannon Tate, I think. Shannon Tate. Like, her and her friends were murdered by the 3 Manson members, and like, that was like the last major event that happened. It's like the 60s literally ended with them being killed. So I'm wondering if like the gesture is a symbolization of the 60s with the cast on. Like, it was going okay. Well, I mean, I wouldn't say that because you had the civil rights movement and everything, but like the decade literally ended. You know, one of the last major things was that horrible tragedy. So I'm wondering if the cast there is representation of that event.
You know what? It wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, exactly.
I think you might.
That's what I get.
If we're being completely honest, we're probably both way off knowing John McClane.
Yeah.
With that being said,
yeah.
I literally couldn't come up with a better theory than you.
Yeah, like that's what I get from this. And see, like it goes into football yet again. It goes like now the halftime air was Sweet Perfume while the sergeants played a marching tune. We all got up to dance, but we never got the chance. So I'm wondering if he's like referencing like how fast like the 50s rock and roll died with the plane crash, how like we're never gonna dance again. Those days have come and gone just like that quickly.
Yeah, well, it's like I feel like this is probably like I imagine this to be like referring to the anti-war protests.
Oh, you know what? You're on to something there.
'Cause, like,
yeah.
People were very, very polarized with that because it could be referring to Vietnam.
Oh,
And,
yeah,
like,
the Vietnam War
we don't want to fight
protests.
this war, and like so, like the soldiers, being the players, are trying to take the field, but the marching band refuses to yield.
Like, they're
that being the protesters, like,
Yeah.
no, we're not doing this.
Yeah, exactly. Because like the Vietnam War, I feel like the reason why there was so much conflict was just kind of like, you know, America was so used to blindly just entering wars for some, because, you know, the news would try to tell you it was for some noble reason. But then the Vietnam War shows up. People are just like, no, there's no reason for us to be over there. Why are we sending all these men to fight someone else's war, you know? And
Yeah, and with those verses, what it makes me think of is just in general, like, I've been in times of my life where people are fighting, and I'm looking at them like, why?
like, why are
Like,
you fighting? You know,
why are
like-
we having this conflict? Like, it's not doing any good. And, like, I can specifically apply it to high school days. I'm about to get a little deep.
No, you're fine. Yeah, no, dude, go for it. The song's pretty deep as is, so
Yeah.
we're good. Go
It's
ahead.
like just so I was in show choir, and I remember. So I was kind of a mutt, where it's like I did 2 years as a crew member, and then I did 2 years as a performer, singing and dancing.
Okay.
But I always hung out with the combo, which was like the band. So I
Oh,
was just
okay.
kind of all over the place. And I just remember looking at like the way that the performers would treat the crew members in the combo and vice versa. And I'm like, why are we having infighting over the dumbest things like this? Like, just do your jobs, have some fun, and go home.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like, I could not agree with you more there. It's like this conflict, there's no reason for it, you know?
Yeah.
Just be happy for what you have, you know? Like you know, I just like, I feel like just people just, we don't need to fight. There doesn't need to be like these wars and like just this horrible stuff. It doesn't need to happen, you know? Just, you know,
Right.
just tell your loved ones how much you love them. Just go do your job, you know, whatever it is, and just go home. You know, you know, like,
Right.
and I totally get you on that.
Because, I mean, it even goes into, like, the next verses, like, the quartet practiced in the park. I think of that being, like, the combo.
Oh, yeah.
And we sang dirges in the dark the day the music died. And, like, that just speaks that to me, even though there's no way that's what he was referring to.
Oh yeah, like
But-
can you imagine? Like we're gonna find like an interview later. It's gonna be some silly little like thing
yeah.
that inspired him to write that. You know.
But I honestly think, like I said, he wrote this to speak different things to different people. Like,
Sure.
this song only holds up now because of how vague it was and how its message changes over time.
Oh yeah, it does. Like, and that's pretty cool though. It can fit in. Like, dude, think about it. 100 years from now, after you and I are long gone, it's still gonna be
in circulation.
in circulation.
Yeah.
It's never gonna die, man. Like this song is gonna, with the way he wrote it, it can fit with like any time era, you know.
Mhm.
And that, like, how many musicians can do that? Because you know how there's bands like Motley Crue. They're the 80s hair band.
I've actually seen them in concert.
Yeah. Like, there's some bands that are a product of the time era they came from, and they wouldn't fit now.
Like,
not many
Smoking
artists
in the boys' room does not apply to today at all.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like, how many musicians can write a song that fits in all the time? You know, it's kind of a rarity if you think about it. You know, it's not. Not everybody can do that. Now, oh man, here we go. Here is a verse I really wanted to get into. So, oh, and there we were all in one place, a generation lost in space with no time left to start again. So I feel like a generation lost in space. I feel like he's talking about NASA and the moon landings. That's my theory. A generation lost in space, talking about all the different moon, like all the space missions and everything. And with no time left to start again. What do you think he means by that?
So I remember what he said it was. He was referring to Woodstock, actually.
Oh,
with this,
really? Okay.
And how he felt like that was a huge waste of time and that they could have done so much more with the resources and that attention that they put on that. But instead, they just had a bunch of hooligans everywhere, and it was terrible. And, like... And that's not how we think of Woodstock. We think of it as this like big harmonious thing that just came together, and that's really not what it was.
No, like,
and the second time they tried it, and then they think they tried it a third time.
They were going to do a 50th anniversary back in 2019, but it got canceled.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness. It's just like
they were terrible.
I don't understand like Woodstock. Like, dude, there's a plaque out in the field where it took place. Like it's some kind of like famous monument in history.
No,
like
it was a bunch of people getting high in a cornfield in the mud.
Yeah, it's just like
that's what it was.
Like everybody who went to that weren't exactly good people. They were all a good majority of them. They were just a bunch of druggies.
Yeah,
not living good lives. It's just like, dude, a lot of weird things happen at that thing, like,
and yet they refer to Summer of '69 as the Summer of Love.
Yeah, like I don't think I would call it that.
No,
it was anything. It was anything but that. you know, like those were the best days of my life. Yeah. Like
they only call it that because it was the hippie era.
Oh, well, yeah, of course.
But I interpret this. Oh, and there we were all in one place, a generation lost in space with no time left to start again. So I think of that as applying it to today, in my mind, a generation feeling stuck. Like because of things that have happened before them, there's nothing they can do, and their life is infinitely harder because of it. And they're just stuck, a generation lost in space, like, just like forgotten, abandoned.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. I definitely get that feeling too. Like, oh yeah, without a doubt. Like, you know, because of past events that happened before they were born, that they can't change that. You know, it's what's done's done. No going back from this. You know, like this is it.
And then this next part is probably one of my favorite lyrics in the entire thing.
Oh, okay.
So come on, Jack be nimble, Jack be quick, Jack Flash sat on a candlestick, 'cause fire is the devil's only friend. I absolutely, every time I read that, I get chills.
Oh, yeah.
It's just, it makes me think of like, the kind of pressure that society puts on people and like, come on, we got quotas to meet. Like, you got to do this. Like, you're not successful if you don't do this, and telling everybody what success is, even though nobody really has a set definition for what success is. Well, and I imagine
it's different.
Jack be nimble, Jack be quick, like hurry up. And then he's going, and then he falls on a candlestick. He's burning alive.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because like, I feel like people think there's like one way to do something. You know, when it comes to like living a good life or having a successful career, like it's different for everyone. Like, each person has their own way of doing things. There isn't okay, this is my opinion. There is no one way to do something. There's your way, there's my way, you know, like it's different for every individual person.
And like just because it's different doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. I mean,
No,
obviously there is
no.
a wrong way to do something.
Oh, sure,
but
without
that doesn't
a
mean
doubt.
there's only one right way.
Yeah,
Like,
that's what I
people
mean.
look so black and white on everything.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Just like that, exactly. Like there's multiple ways, like good ways to do something, you know, and it's different for everyone, you know. Like it's like you said, black and white. Like there's no gray areas for like when people, like, you know what I mean, like when people look at it, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a very good. I did not think of it like in that particular lyric in that way. Now here's the next one. Like this one here, I was rewinding to get into. So it goes like this. Oh, and as I watched him on the stage, my hands were clenched in fists of rage. No angel born in hell could break that Satan's spell. Now, for me, when I read this, I feel like I imagine it like this. You're thinking back to like maybe you saw a concert of your favorite musician, and literally right after that show, that musician gets killed in some sad accident, and you imagine yourself back there watching that show. Your hands are clenched in fists of rage because you're knowing this is the last time you're gonna see that musician. You're never gonna see he or she again, you know, like, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's what I get.
Having the Woodstock thing in mind, what it makes me think of is like, I think he was looking at that as a mockery of rock and roll, and like you all are acting like complete idiots out here doing all of this, painting a bad image, insulting this art.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you've got all of these like drug addicts and these like gang people, and just they're not there to enjoy the music. The music's dead.
Yeah, like they're like dude, a prime example on how bad Woodstock was. John Fogerty, like Creedence Clearwater Revival were out there, right? They come out on stage, and it's like, I don't know, 9 or 10 o'clock at night. Everybody's asleep. Everybody's just laying on the field, sound asleep.
Yep.
And like, he's bummed out of his mind because he thought this was an amazing opportunity because there was like 1 million people at this thing. And I was watching him on Conan from like 2011. He said there was one guy all the way in the very back with a lighter, and he's like, "Don't worry, John, I'm still here." So he played his whole set for that one guy in the back, like.
Well, you know what? I have a lot of respect for that guy.
Yeah, I know. And I saw John Fogerty, man. Like, Creedence was the very first band I got into when I was growing up, when I was like 11 or 12. They're like one of the best rock and roll bands at all time. In my opinion, they were the best act at Woodstock.
Yeah.
Because, like, I feel, going back to what you were saying earlier, like, with musicians like Jimi Hendrix or like Janis Joplin, I feel like their music didn't feel like rock and roll. I feel like they were trying to write stuff that fit the hippie drug era. It didn't feel like they had like a message to me. It felt like, to me, their songs felt like a mockery. Like, I mean, that's just my...
So you clench your fists... Your
clench
hands
your
were clenched in fists of rage, huh?
Because like these musicians are writing stuff that this is not what rock and roll should be, you know? Like this isn't art, and it feels like you're just writing stuff to appease these people. And instead of speaking to everyone, it feels like you're trying to write stuff that just speaks to these drug people. You know, like that's what I get. You know, like the good old days of like when songs were written for anyone. Now you're just targeting a specific group. Like, and that's what I get from that.
Yeah, and then like And as the flames climbed high into the night, talking about, I think what you were just talking about, where it's like it went on forever, and by the end of it, everyone was just passed out.
Yeah,
and
like,
it's like,
do you know like how long the quote hippie era lasted?
no.
Like how long? I wonder how long that went for. Like, can you look that up? I'm kind of curious. Like what was the quote hippie era? Like, I was thinking it was like a late 60s, early 70s. I don't think it lasted that long. I'm gonna estimate at least 10 years.
1960s and 70s.
Okay, so like those two particular decades.
Yes.
So 20
So,
years. Like
In the 80s, they probably all became like the yuppies, I think they're called.
oh yeah, like this isn't music. When we were young, that was music, right?
Well, I think it's
Like,
more like they realized that they needed to get a job and then became very successful.
it's like, oh, we should probably quit doing this and actually do something meaningful with our lives.
Yeah, like, let's put some shoes on.
Yeah, like let's actually, wear good clothing, not walk around half naked everywhere we go. Like, and yeah, I totally get that. So, and oh, and you know what's funny? I mentioned Janis Joplin earlier. This next lyric, I think, is talking about Janis. So we're at the end. So the main chorus, so at this point in the song, right, it's gone back into a softer tone that the song began with. And Dawn goes, I met a girl who sang the blues, and I asked her for some happy news. She just smiled and turned away. And every time I've heard this song, I always thought that he may have been talking about Janis Joplin.
That's
girl-
actually true.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, because I met a girl who sang the blues, Janis, asked her for happy news. She just smiled and turned away. Like she,
like hoping that she could keep that era alive.
and she died.
Heroin overdose.
Heroin overdose. She's part of the 27 Club, along with Jimi Hendrix and the Doors lead singer Jim Morrison. And they were all those are like the big names of the late 60s, and
then talking about like the record store.
I went
that's
down
quite literally talking about a record store.
Yeah,
Go ahead and read it.
Yeah, so here's the second part. I went down to the sacred store where I heard the music years before, but the man there said the music wouldn't play.
Yeah, it's literally talking about a record store where it's like, I imagine he probably had like the same record of Buddy Holly that he had
When he was
in
a
the past,
kid?
but he
Yeah.
had no way to play it anymore.
Oh yeah, because like he's dead. It doesn't mean anything.
Well,
it doesn't
no,
mean anything.
he probably literally didn't have the tech to play it anymore because everything had been updated.
Oh sure. I wonder if it was one of those old like small 45s. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
wonder if that was it.
Maybe.
Because I don't think the bigger records didn't come out till like the 60s, right? Like I think back then you only had the small 45s, and I think those were kind of dated even by late 50s. I think like it was time for like a serious like upgrade.
And yeah, absolutely.
And in the streets, the children screamed, the lovers cried, and the poets dreamed. Not a word was spoken. The church bells all were broken. I feel like it, and in the streets, the children screamed. I feel like he's talking about like, because and behind the music, going back to the day the music died, like a guy was talking about how like he kept finding teenagers like on the streets crying. They're like, "Did you hear what happened? Buddy Holly died." Like they were so sad about it. That's what I wonder if that's what he's talking about. Like in the streets, the children screamed.
I think that's what he's talking about too. Like I imagine it like they got sad about it, but then they just moved on and life went on the same way. Like
Yeah.
the lovers cried and the poets dreamed. Like, okay, so this was sad. They're gonna keep on and keep doing what they do.
Yeah, but not. What do you mean? What do you think he meant by? But not a word was spoken. The church bells all were broken.
I think it's just people remembered it for a moment and then just tried to forget about it and move on. Like, we're not going to talk about that anymore.
Oh,
we're going to have
sure.
the funeral and then the church bells are broken. We're gone.
Yeah, we're gone. Like we held the service.
Yeah.
we're out. Yeah, I could definitely see that maybe being the case. And the three men I admire most, the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, they caught the last train for the coast the day the music died. Now, there's two ways I think there's two ways that could be taken. One, three men, Buddy, Richie, Bopper. Or I think he might be talking about JFK, Robert Kennedy, and Martin Luther King Jr. Because those three men all three were assassinated within the span of 5 years. So
I've heard those theories before, and I think those are possibilities. There is a third one.
Okay, what do you think?
It could mean that he was like the world was so torn up and going all over the place that he felt like in that moment, like even God above had left them.
Yeah, like he doesn't feel like, he's doing much to help. It's like
right. Yeah, and that's a third way to take that verse.
Yeah, definitely.
And they take the last train for the coast singing Bye Bye Mr. American Pie, that whole thing.
Yeah,
that's really like the major parts to highlight on. But like I kind of take it like the third way. That's what I interpret it as. Is like someone is so sad and distraught that they're like, God, why have you abandoned me?
Yeah, definitely. It's like I did what your book said, it's like I don't feel, like redeemed maybe. Like it's not helping. Like, why aren't you helping me? You know? Yeah, I could definitely see that too. And that really brings us to the end of the song. Now, I'm just going to go off the record here and say that I'm like absolutely blown away with like the going in. I'm telling you right now, the big reason why I was so excited to do this one, because I was just so curious to see the interpretations that you had. Like, dude, like just hearing the interpretations we had some similar ideas on some things, but like we had totally different ideas on others, and it was so cool like getting to hear your inside, what you think it is, and like your points are just like, whoa, like that could be it, like it was just so cool. And I had a really good time, getting to do this. Like I think this was an amazing idea to do. Just talking about one specific song. Yeah. And, I was actually thinking sometime we definitely have to do this again. And I actually have a song idea, The Edmund Fitzgerald by Gordon Lightfoot. It came out in the mid-'70s, and it's another song written just like this. It's like 7 minutes long, him recounting the whole incident of that ship sinking. And it's one of my favorite songs, and I think that could possibly be another good one to cover, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you ever heard it before?
I haven't, but I will definitely take a listen.
Yeah, but I'll tell you more about it some other time.
Sure. But I got a very deep question to ask you.
Okay, go ahead.
For you, in your life, what was the day the music died?
Oh boy. So I guess I am gonna get a little deep here. I think the day the music died, for me, would have to be when my grandmother passed away. Because growing up, I don't want this to sound sad in any way, shape, or form. Like, I'm over my grief. Like, I'm a lot better now. Just like my childhood, just like friendships just didn't work out with me, and like it wasn't my fault. Just all the people I chose to be friends with were all just a bunch of narcissists that weren't good people, and I was too innocent and blind at the time to notice until they all broke my heart one by one. And and I was really messed up. And my grandmother was always there for me to help me get through that. She was one of my true best friends, and every time I went to her house to visit her and Grandpa, it was some of the best memories from my childhood. Just sitting in that living room in their small house, just talking about whatever it was on my mind, and everything we talked about stayed between us, and it made my visits so special, and not a day goes by that I wish I could have gotten to have one more visit with her before she died. And, you know, and I went to go visit my grandfather on Sunday before I came back here, and it's hard walking into that house, not seeing her sitting on her spot on the couch. You know, it's hard, and her death was one of the most hardest things I ever had to go through, and my life changed from that point forward. And her not being here anymore, I still, you know, have to deal with that, you know, because I think about her every other day, and I wish that she was still here because she was one of my greatest friends. So that was the day the music died for me. What was the day the music died for you, Preston?
For me, it was probably the day we went under quarantine for COVID. I had always had a little bit of hope and thinking like, okay, yes, so there's this new virus. Things are kind of scary in the world, but we're in America and we're safe. Like, that's in China. That's not going to make it here. And then all of a sudden, we have to put our entire life on hold, and we don't know what this virus is capable of, and there's all this scary stuff going on. And I just have never looked at the world the same way ever since. Like, I try to have a positive approach on things, but I have a lot less trust and optimism than I used to.
Yeah, like I definitely get that. Like, those 2 years of COVID was a lot, you know, for everyone. Like, those 2 years were really bad. And you got to keep in mind, though, during those 2 years, we had no idea how long the virus is going to last. Like, I think I saw in some places people were estimating it could go on for like 5 years or something.
It was
maybe
like
even a
indefinite.
decade.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to stay cooped up for 5 years. Like, we're young. Like, we have not established a foundation for the rest of our life yet, and we had to just put it on hold indefinitely, having no idea what to do.
Yeah,
that's terrible.
Yeah, it is. You know, and I was halfway through my sophomore year of college, you know, when this happened, and when all this was happening, I would have been I was 19.
I was the
COVID
same age.
Hit. Yeah, I was 19. I turned 20 in August.
Yeah, I was the exact same age as you.
Yeah. No. Wait. I wasn't. I was 20. When all this was going on, I was 20 years old. Not 19. I was 20, and in 2020 I turned 21. So yes, I was 20. You know, young guy, just sophomore year in college. You know, and then this shows up. You know, and like I'm really. I mean, the thing is, though, I'm very happy that I was able to get through high school before all that went down. Like, I feel like that would have hit me worse if it hit during high school.
Well, my brother, he was I can't remember if he was a sophomore or a junior, but he when we were shut down was still in high school. When he was a senior, they were opened back up, but not like it was before. And it's like, I used to think that my high school years were terrible. And then I look back and I'm like, you know what? I actually had a pretty normal high school life. Like, hindsight is 2020.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I look back now, it's like the COVID years really opened my perspective on a lot of things. And one of them was like, okay, on second thought, high school was actually pretty chill for me, all things considered. There were a lot of bad parts, but I had it pretty good compared to others.
Yeah, like, we got to have normal dances, and like, we didn't have to wear a mask to go to class and have all of these like limited things, and have some of our friends doing it online, and just all of that stuff that happened. The biggest thing we had to worry about was, don't look stupid in front of all of your classmates, and try to swallow the crappy lunch that they serve that day.
Oh, yeah, I know, right? It's like, you could not have been more correct with that.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, definitely.
But when you're in high school, it feels like it's everything, because it's like, you think that this is like the peak of life, and it's really not.
Yeah.
These grades are the most important. Like, no,
No,
college is so much bigger.
No, I literally, I was telling my grandpa when I went to go visit him Sunday that college has been trillions better than high school. Like my college experience has been way better in every single way. And he even told me, he's like, I know college is going to be much better for you. Like, I told him, I'm like, you could not have been more right.
But of course, at the time, I was told the same thing. And I don't know about you, but I didn't believe it. I was like, oh, it's going to be the same thing at a different school. No, it's exactly right.
Yeah.
It's almost as if people that have experienced similar things know what they're talking about.
Oh, mind blown. But I think that's going to mark the end of this recording. And Preston, yet again, thank you so much for being on the show, and thank you for giving me this amazing topic idea. Like this has been a very special recording, like for me, because like I never thought I'd ever do this for like an idea, but this has been a fantastic recording.
Oh yeah, no problem. I actually got the idea from I think it was you. I think you mentioned the song American Pie in our Yellow Brick Road album episode.
Yeah,
and I was like, you
right.
know what? We should do an episode on American Pie because it's so deep and so long. We could do an entire episode on that.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's an 8-minute song, and it gives us a ton to talk about. You know, and yeah, like this has been. I had so much fun doing this. Like, and I think I know your answer. Did you have a good time, Preston?
Absolutely,
Well, of course. Like we always have a blast when we do the music, when we do this recordings. So much fun. So I just want to say I hope you enjoyed this recording. I want to thank my amazing friend Preston for being on the show again. And this is one heck of a way to start the spring semester. Like if we're already starting off this good, and I think this is a great sign of amazing things to come. And I'm very excited for the next like songs, albums, and movies that we will cover over the next 5 months. And I want to make dang sure that this semester is way better than the last, and I want to make the episode so much better. So I hope you enjoyed this recording, and wherever you're listening to this in the world, I hope you're living an amazing life. I hope things are working out for you, and I wish you good luck with your amazing lives. So until next time, this is DJ Apollo with
Preston Vanswall.
And you are listening to the Tales of Music and Film.